Welcome back, everyone. It is IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective. We've been on a 2-week break for the Easter holidays, and if you haven't noticed, a lot has been happening in the world in the last 2 weeks. But in particular, an attention-stealing figure has really kind of popped up in the media a lot lately. Donald Trump has been stealing headlines for 6 years, and he's really back in the news again lately. He would like us to be focused on him running for the presidency in the United States of America in 2024 again. But rather, you've probably noticed, we're more focused on the fact that one of his many legal lawsuits has come to a head, and he has officially been indicted on some 34 felony counts in the hush money case of the porn star Stormy Daniels. Now, there are many, many legal lawsuits awaiting both trial, indictments, all the rest of it. This is the first one that has come to this point, and it's the first time in United States history that a past president has been officially arrested for a felony charge. So it's really quite a big deal. But from the spiritual perspective, we talk a lot about divisive figures like Donald Trump. We often wonder, what the heck? Why? What is he up to? And tonight's IKYA Live is going to focus on this guy, Donald Trump, and we're going to open up with the question that we've gotten from a lot of different students and viewers of IKYA Live. What is Donald Trump doing? Why is he playing this outsized role in American politics and on the global stage? And IKYA, our first question, what is Donald Trump's spiritual mission?
First, I'd like to remind everyone that what's happening on the planet spiritually is that we're slowly moving to the next level of human consciousness. And like any form of growth and evolution, it means that we have to adapt, we have to change, and everything else has to be cleansed out. This takes time, and there's a lot of resistance. Now, some people, in all processes like this, when the consciousness is being lifted, you have some people who are kind of with it, who already incarnate with a more advanced consciousness, and they are pulling it forward, right? And then you have the ones who incarnate still stuck in the old consciousness, and they experience a lot of resistance. And that's fine. But remember that when you incarnate on this planet, it's because you have conflicts. And if you have conflicts within, they will externalize. So, conflicts within, there will be conflicts in the world. This is not a peaceful planet. It's not what it's designed for. It's for everybody, all life forms, to work out inner conflicts in the outer world. So, whenever the consciousness is lifted, when there is more light, you can see the dirt more clearly, right? So, when you're used to a lower level of light, you don't really see the dirt that much, and you can, be happy, in your home, and you think it's tidy and clean until the lights come on for real, and then you start seeing the dirt, and then you have a reaction. And this is really what's happening in the world. And it's quite complex, but we need to understand that the reaction, whatever we see in the world with extremism, orthodoxy, all this polarization, all of it is part of the reaction to the fact that we are moving forward, that consciousness is being lifted. This does not happen before consciousness is being lifted. It's happening as a reaction to the fact that consciousness has been lifted. It means that the karmic kind of burnout or workout processes have increased, whether you like it or not. And if you don't like it, you just want things to be the way they were, you will have more reactions and more resistance. So, what has happened as well is that based on the old kind of template of consciousness for humans, life has become too complex, too difficult, right? It's so much to deal with, so much to relate to, and humans don't like that. We like a simpler life. So we have to go through a change. We have to adapt to a more complex way of living. Now, the way we do that is by lifting our consciousness. Just like, when you are in a lower consciousness, just think of if you're closer to the ground, there's a limit to how far you can see, and it's a limit to how much context you're able to understand. When you lift your consciousness, you can see for greater distances, and you can see patterns, right? You can see landscapes, you can see connections you're not able to see when you're kind of too close to the ground. And that's also how we then are able to deal with an increased level of complexity. So we have to move. But when we don't want to move upwards, it's because we still have too much resistance. And if you think of a hot air balloon, you need to get rid of some sandbags in order to move upwards, right? So this is what we're going through collectively. And when we experience a lot of stress, when we have resistance, the body will interpret this as stress. And when we go into a state of stress and fear, the brain and the mind will become more binary, which means we'll start seeing things more as black and white. We're for or against, because when we are afraid, we have to deal with a very simple solution. It's life or death, friend, enemy, and we can't relate to the finer nuances of life. So everything will be reduced to, can I live or can I die, right? And it's easy for the brain to navigate that way. And that's why we then take a complex landscape and kind of break it down to black and white. Now, when you look at a character like Trump, everything is either, the biggest and best ever, or it's the worst ever. It's never anything in between. He represents the binary state. So he represents the stress and the resistance. And, he is the result of the collective process of consciousness. It's important when we look at individuals, leaders, icons, that we understand them as the product. They're chosen by the people. It's not the other way around. Trump is not a problem. He's a solution. When you have a conflict within, it needs to surface. Just like I say that when you have an illness, that is actually the beginning of the healing. Because when you have a tension inside, when you have an imbalance, for you to be able to deal with it, it has to surface, it has to manifest. So you can then look at it, you can interact with it and solve it. When you look at the United States, what happened historically that I find really interesting is that, after the Second World War, you had a phase where the living standard of everyone was lifted. Everyone was included. It was basically coming together and making a better world. But after a while, it turned into the more individualistic approach, meaning that it was, instead of building a society, building a civilization, you built individuals. And when you do that, not everyone will be included. And in the whole Western world, we have chosen a path where instead of building civilization, we build individuals. We build corporation, we build individual entities. I think that is very important, which means a lot of people are left behind. And we've reached a level where the distance and the tension, right, between the people left behind and the people in front is so great that it has to collapse. then you will have turmoil in different ways. You're gonna, throughout history, that's been revolutions, it's been this or that, but it basically means that, that gap will have to be worked out somehow. So this is part of what's happening. And the people left behind will be an enormous stress, enormous conflict. And Trump is the product of that.
So we've gotten a couple of questions in the direction from some of our students. Typically, as spiritual students, we often have a little bit of an allergy toward negative or kind of aggressive or destructive movements. And a couple of people have asked, like, is this kind of reaction that Trump represents, is that natural or necessary, or is it like a sign of a healthy evolution, or is it a sign that actually we're doing something, that we're off, something's wrong?
Right. It is healthy and absolutely necessary. When something happens, it's because there is no alternative. There is only reality. So when something happens, because that is what is. Now, in the States, when you have a big group feeling that they're not part of society, and when society has become, and decision making and government is so far removed from people and they feel they're not part of, controlling their own lives, this gap is not healthy. And as I say, Trump is basically, if your taxi driver or racist grandpa at Thanksgiving became president, right? People are actually talking and thinking the way Trump is expressing himself and the way he's, feeling and in their stress, being extremely binary. So yes, everything will surface. Whatever is there within will have to find outer manifestation. So it's healthy because this is how we heal. Remember that, as I said, when there's such a big gap between the people who've moved forward, also spiritually, and the people who've not, it will have to be worked out. And just thinking of it, just like, if you're knitting a scarf and you missed a loop somewhere, you will have to basically remove everything until you reach that point. So it's healthy for a society to move forward, and then you have to find the common denominator. Like, where is the ground here? So it's a natural and healthy process for a civilization to move forward because it has to include everyone.
So we have a question from Leanna here in the audience.
In the late 30s and before the Second World War, we had approximately this similar binary thinking. What's the similarities and the differences between then and now?
It's an excellent question. Everything moves in cycles. So it's many of the same elements because it was the same thing. Remember that second half of the 1800s, society moved very fast. There were a lot of changes, industrialization, political changes, and an enormous belief in the future, right? And you had the same thing happening, where the modernization of the world did not include everyone. You had the same type of tension, where you had the modern world versus the old. And it had to collapse. Again, yes, people are always drawn to extremism as a result of the binary mind. And it's just a symptom. And people can't help themselves. As I said, when we are in fear, we're supposed to reduce everything to simple choices. And it's interesting also, we want to be in charge of our own lives. And we want to feel like I'm in control. This is a reason why people prefer to drive versus taking an airplane. People feel more fear when they take an airplane, although an airplane is much safer than a car but it's the story about having the influence, right? So when it comes to complex questions and complex problems, we want to feel that we understand them because they affect us, right? So we have to believe in our own common sense. And it never works because the world is too complex for a common sense. Common sense is bias based on experience. And I've said we in our civilization, we're way past the point where we can use common sense. Just think of physics, astrophysics, mathematics. You cannot apply common sense to understand it. So, but as a life form, we want to feel that we understand because it's our lives. And this is also, how we want to then reduce everything, and we demand simple answers to very complex questions. And that happens in the 30s, and it's happening now. So it's a completely natural movement of finding common denominator, because building a society, building a collective consciousness, you will have to base the kind of ground on what everybody agrees upon, because that is the foundation of the space. And there will be conflict between the different perspectives, right? And either the more advanced perspective will have to educate kind of the bottom, right? Or the bottom will have to pull down and simplify the complexity. Because it basically also, when you're pruning a bush or a tree, it's because you have an overgrowth, right? And it kind of disciplines the bush or the tree to focus on the healthy branches. And this is what happens when you want to, or like the bottom, demand simplification. They need to understand you have to cut back the overgrowth. And look at our civilization. It's completely overgrown, right? It's all directions at the same time. We need to discipline ourselves. We need to have a better focus. And when we do, it becomes more understandable for everyone, right? So Trump is someone who represents this process. And this is why he's become a global icon, because this is actually a global process. It's not just for Americans, but the whole modern civilization is going through this, right? And he's ignorant, completely ignorant, but that's his strength, right? Because that means that the bush will be pruned, right? The branches will be cut, because unless he understands it, right? And there are millions and millions of people around the world who are just like him. So it's healthy, because if we can make Trump understand, then everyone can understand. It's really about that. Mm-hmm.
Back to our audience here, we have a question, I think, from we are back to a follow-up question from the audience here.
Yes?
Yeah. I was thinking about this whole situation in the world. If I was like to turn it around and look at my own backyard and look at the conflicts with myself, because I can really relate to when I have growth and I realize something and I can really stretch myself, there are parts of me who are kicking and screaming and don't want to be a part of this at all. And I was wondering, how can we work with those parts and make them a part of our team instead of them fighting against us?
Exactly. You have to find your inner Trump, because, he, as an icon and as like a Greek god, right? He represents certain characteristics. And the reason why he's the most famous person in human history, because he is at this point, he's the most recognized person ever. It's because he represents something important. Because we're all ignorant, but we pretend that we're not, right? We pretend that we understand, that we know, right? And it's that. Often when we Also in spiritual work, right? We have overgrowth, right? Because we become so more advanced and so complex and this or that. And often we become removed from practical life. I've talked a lot about this. That this is one of the biggest traps of modern spirituality is to remove ourselves from life and say, well, I'm beyond this. I don't have to deal with this, you know? And we do. We incarnate on this planet because we have inner conflicts. And to say, no, I'm not dealing with that because I'm too advanced, it's a blockage. We're blind. Trump represents that simplification, right? And often we believe in things that simply do not make sense. But it doesn't have to be common sense, right? But it has to make sense. It has to be logical. I always say that when our growth, when our spiritual studies are real, it will make absolute sense. It will be absolutely logical. It will kind of work emotionally, mentally, logically, mathematically, historically, in every possible way. It will work because it's true. And it's not true unless you can transform it and translate it into any perspective, and it will still be the same core. And often, when we put what we believe and what we practice to that test, right? And this is, in our civilization at this point, there is so much fluff. And so-called spiritual work is also part of this world. It's also full of fluff. So I think, the resistance also to Trump is feeling better than he is because he's ignorant. He's a compulsive liar, but guess what? Humans are, right? Just think of how many times a day you lie to yourself or to other people. I've met a lot of people over the years, and people also who claim to be in a high level of consciousness, I can see they lie every time they open their fucking mouth, right? Still, because they are in conflict, because they feel they're not quite there, but they want other people to believe that they are. It's all that. It's that overgrowth. Cutting back. If you're able to convey your state to the most ignorant part of you, yeah, you're getting somewhere. It's always finding the ground, the common denominator within and in your own life. So I think a lot of, the arrogance we have when we meet characters like Trump and his followers, and seeing that, they're so primitive, this or that, it's us not recognizing that we're actually the same. Because we are part of that fluff. If it was grounded, everyone would understand. When you have understood a spiritual principle fully, you're able to convey it to a cat or a flower or a baby because you vibrate it, right? And you can make anyone understand. You're able to use it, transform it, and kind of replicate it in someone else when they need it. If you're too busy trying to explain and be spiritual, you haven't understood anything yet. So I think that this is part of why so many react to him, and the arrogance, not seeing that he's simply the voice of ignorance that we need to question ourselves, question the civilization, because nothing makes sense to him. And also when it doesn't make sense, we make up our own. This is what we see today. He represents that reality is whatever he says it is, right? You can have, footage of him doing something, and he said it didn't happen. Nope. False news, fake news, and millions of people will believe him because they too prefer their beliefs over reality. Now, when we've come to the point where we don't understand society anymore and we don't understand the intention of our leaders, we trust ourselves. We trust our own instincts. And humans are deeply religious. The less we understand, the more we're left to our own devices trying to pick out what we understand, and then we're trying to connect the dots, right? And whatever we, figure out. That's what we believe. And it's removed from fact, removed from analysis, removed from the bigger pictures, which means then you establish beliefs that might be completely bullshit, but you believe them because we are designed to believe rather than relate to facts. So when he demonstrates that reality means nothing to him, it will be whatever he says it is, those people will support it because they feel the same way. It's protesting against a reality they don't understand and that they can't influence or change. Because it's a reality they feel is trying to control them and limit them, and a reality that doesn't want what's best for them. So that, no, I can make my own reality, thank you very much. And he's successful at it. People want him protesting against reality and to win, because that means that they can win too. We have to understand where this is coming from. It comes from a deep pain of this civilization having failed to include millions and millions of people. And he is voicing it so many different ways. It's the same thing why, he's not just a liar, he's a criminal, right? He's a swindler, he's a hustler. He does not pay his taxes. Everything about him, he's a collection of red flags like nothing else. But that's why people support him. Because it means he can stand up to reality and win. No one has ever been able to do this before. And people love it. Because they don't want to be part of this reality or this world. They want to see that, yeah, there is an alternative. So he gives people hope that they can create their own reality and win. And is that any different from what many people in modern spirituality are doing? Sometimes choosing belief systems that obviously go against any form of fact, but choosing to believe, right? So it's part of the human journey.
So first we have a question online that is, okay, everything you're saying, there's nothing to argue in it at all. But from the spiritual perspective and as spiritual seekers, is it not our spiritual mission that we have to take Trump to task and hold him accountable for his lies and all of that? Isn't that also part of the evolution, or does that maybe not serve the evolution?
That does not serve evolution. In many ways, if we want to be part of the healing, we have to heal. Remember that life does not care about politics. It's just letting everyone work out our conflicts and heal. You can't attack someone for being in pain. Everything that he's expressing as a person and who he represents, it comes from deep pain, deep fear. And you can't punish people for that. And yes, he triggers conflict and all of that, but we don't have to be part of it. We can observe it, we can love it, we can understand. This is just part of how a civilization works. This is part of how consciousness changes. But if we criticize, if we're being negative, we're actually feeding it, right? He is in many ways a manifestation of conflict, of that binary mind, of that fear, of that opposition to reality. And if we criticize it, if we're afraid of it, we're actually feeding that energy because we then operate on the same level. If we're not on that level, we can see it and we can understand that this will have to work itself out. This is a necessary healthy manifestation, and he's loud enough for what he represents to reach around the world and to let all of these conflicts come to the surface. So our attitude needs to be first to love and accept and understand what's going on, to not criticize it, but also understand that yes, there will be conflicts and he will be held accountable somewhat, but that's not our job. That's for those who are part of this conflict to figure out. Our job is to work in the higher consciousness where we could just see the different waves of evolution, different ways of flow, and how it operates organically to promote growth and healing. So we always have to be very relaxed, never judge anything, just trying to understand, trying to give space, trying to love. And we need to love everything equally and learn to not have so much bias, because remember, what you like, what you dislike is not spiritual. It's just based on the programs in your genetics and your survival. It's not important. What's important is that everyone is on a journey of unfoldment. It doesn't matter what we do, where we go. It's only that we have different paths. We have different pasts, different history, different conflicts, different resistance that we're trying to figure out. And we all have to encounter that in our own way, which means we come to different conclusions. We see things differently. It's like we're walking up the same mountain, but from different angles, you know, different sides, and we see different things. And we need to let everyone walk their path. Trump is walking his. And also remember one thing that's important to understand. When you go into a lifetime like that, it's not like you are immature, right? He has an enormous strength. Look at the amount of conflict and, you know, energy that many of you are sensitive, right? You can feel energy from other people, and many of you feel like if it's too much, oh, you collapse. Think of having, you know, 2 billion people projecting at you, right? With intensity and anger or whatever it is every day. It simply means that his incarnation is specialized, but it also means that where he is at in his evolution is quite advanced because he's experimenting on kind of large scale manifestations and interactions. And you don't do that unless you're quite advanced. So any specialization is limited. It means often that you go into a lifetime where you focus on certain things, right? Because you want to study them thoroughly. It's just like, you know, back to physics. A scientist in physics can be a complete idiot in any other part of life, right? But once they're in the lab, you know, they're basically, and it's like that. So he's obviously quite evolved. But this is a specialized incarnation when he is experimenting in his own way. There's room for everyone. There's room for every path. And we need to learn to love every path, every approach, every reality the same way.
All right, we have a question here in the audience.
Yes, thank you. This has clarified a lot. Just want to point out, you said he was totally ignorant, and now you said he's quite advanced, which is my take as well. He's both.
Yeah.
But I also noted that he is one, I think the first one since Carter who did not go to war. And also, he pulled the U.S. out of WHO, or tried to, until the election came and Biden put it back in.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was quite a strategic, bold, and daring move that actually seemed healthy.
Actually, it was not daring. Remember, he is a complete coward. He cannot deal with things he do not understand. He is a terrible negotiator. So when he has to enter a complex space, he doesn't know what to do. He goes completely perplexed. He has no idea what to do. he expressed himself as a child, right? And in these organizations, they're quite sophisticated. This is also why he hates diplomats, because, it's a different level, right? So he had to pull out because he doesn't know what to do. And also, he's really afraid. People who portray themselves, remember that he did everything he could to avoid military, right? He's not a strong person. He's extremely vulnerable. He's very afraid. He's an afraid little boy. Remember that this is a specialized incarnation. So although spiritually he's evolved, the form and the incarnation is specialized for him to work with these characteristics as a symbol and a voice. So he pulled out because he has no idea how to navigate. And but it's also part of pruning, right? What's interesting about it is the effect of discipline that it has had. It's completely unintentional from his part because he has no idea what he's doing. But the effect is still, again, the village idiot running a business, right? It means that everyone around him will have to be sharp in the hat to figure things out because there's no leadership. So it has this very kind of disciplining effect. It just cuts the branches off, which means that there will be some left. So it's this interesting dynamic. As I say, it's the pruning effect that we're seeing. That that's healthy. But it's from his perspective, it's unintentional because he has no idea. But this is the fun thing about greater movements and how things work, because as a person, he has really no idea about his own function. Because, of course, as a person, he's a narcissist to a level which he's only interested in himself and his own fame, and there it stops. But it's how that becomes a symbol that other people can identify with, and all of that, which makes it so fascinating. But when it came to politics, unless he could be the center of attention, he was not interested. And that was really behind most of his decisions. But it still works because, shaking the tree, sometimes just like making kind of random decisions, can also be interesting. Because still, when you have the best strategist making decisions, often they don't know what they're doing. It's based on assumption, right? And you can have the best analytical strategist, and they can make terrible decisions. So often, when we take random decisions, they can work out just as well. So we can have excellent results from simply taking decisions, no matter what they are, because it means that often when there's change, we will be able to channel in energy in new ideas simply because of change. It doesn't matter what it is. So we can also make awful decisions, but they will turn out fine because it simply opens new doors. So it's all fun.
So we've got a question that, based on how you've been talking about it, one way to describe this process that's unfolding is, in a way, parts of society have stretched forward since World War II, but a bunch of them have been left behind, and we're, in a way, being called back to that, or sliding back to that lowest common denominator. But one concern is that if we don't, if it's spiritually not growth-oriented to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves and try to, hold Trump accountable or whatever, aren't we in a position where we could really see some major setbacks and slides in, social progress, economic development, all of those things?
Absolutely. But that means it was never progress in the first place. Because it means that, the floor is where it is. This is what I mean, like when pruning the tree or the bush, It means that you get to that point of like, how far did we actually grow? That includes everyone. What is the reality and the kind of level of civilization that we can all agree upon? So yes, we will slide backwards. But just see what happened in the 30s and the result. After the Second World War, which you can say was a correction. There was, remember that a lot of what Germany stood for and the philosophy was very well accepted. It was when Hitler took it to the extreme that became clear that, oh, right, this is a little bit too much. Right, we were wrong. And then they could all pin it on him. But remember that most things he stood for was established as science, as philosophy, and everyone agreed in the Western world, this is how it was. So he just made it clear that no, we're not going that way. So sometimes it takes the kind of extreme version before we can see that this is unproductive. So the Second World War was a correction. And after that, we were catapulted forward, right? Because then the pruning was successful. And then, as a society, we decided on certain values, right? Certain ideas, how we should function together, and we all agreed, at least for 2 decades. And then it was over. But you had a while there where people could come together, right? And that's what happened. And this is what will happen again. We need to get to that point where everyone feel that they're part of something, that they're not just being controlled. Because, in the 30s as well, you had all these conspiracy theories. Same thing. And of course, you can look at it and see the conspiracy theories, they will be kind of born when people feel that they don't have enough influence, when they don't understand what's going on, when they feel that power is something up there controlling them, right? So it's a symptom. And you make up stories because you don't know. And now we see a flood of conspiracy theories. It's, again, a symptom that people feel that power and decision-making is too far away from them. So they just make up fantasies, and it's a symptom that, yeah, it is too far away. People need to feel that it's their lives, that they're in control of their own lives and their own journey. So it will adjust itself, just like it did after Second World War, and it will just be for a while. But it will be enough to, from that point on, move human civilization forward yet again.
So one of our students on YouTube says that Trump is a man of the people, a sign of the times. Can't disagree with that. His tribal approach seems natural and even admired by the trauma of these times, and she feels that karma is perhaps the only thing holding him back, something connected to the collective good. What do you say to that, IKYA? Is karma the only thing holding Trump back at this point?
Well, karma is the only thing holding anyone back from anything. That's why we're here. So, yeah, he's not being held back. He's on his journey. So remember that we're all exactly in our kind of exact point of evolution, spiritually, as a life form. And that's a fact. And we work from there. So no one is ever kind of held back because we all move forward no matter what. Every single experience we have will change what we know, and therefore we grow. So it is with everyone. So I think he's living his best life. And, it will be fun when this lifetime is over, how he analyzes his own lifetime, because this has turned out exactly the way it was planned. And when you look at what he has become, and you look at his life's journey, you can see all of that was basically a preparation for this. So he is definitely kind of fulfilling his life journey bigly. And We all should, right? That's also one thing that I think people can learn. He does not let himself be stopped by anything, including reality. You know? And in many ways, it's wonderful. He's like a cartoon character who defies everything, including reality and facts and science, and he gets away with it because he is so strong in his belief that you know, he can make reality, that he gets away with absolutely anything. Any other human being would have been in prison for life a long time ago, but he gets away with absolutely everything because he does not let reality stop him. And in many ways, that's wonderful. Because I often talk about this, but even when it comes to laws, he has understood this. Laws are basically something that people make up. And they're not necessarily smart. It's not necessarily ethical. It's simply the majority figuring out how they want things to work. There's no higher truth in that. It's just like, yeah, what a bunch of people decided. And that changes. So why relate to it as something that is more ethical? It's not. A lot of laws are completely stupid. And it's you know, for someone who wants to build and create, laws can be just, you know, the biggest hindrance. So he does not care about laws at all. And remember also, for normal people, again, when they feel that the power and decision making is removed from them, they will also see that the laws are not to their benefit. It means that they will start disrespecting the law. And they will fantasize about kind of breaking the law because they see it's not for them, it's against them. And this is why the more crimes Trump does, the more he's supported, right? Because people want to be like him. They see a man who can break any law and get away with it. And for those who feel that they're, like, you know, disenfranchised and that they're not, and that the laws are against them, that's how they want to be. So when he's not paying when he's not paying his taxes, yeah, you know, when he steals, yeah, when he lies, people know that he's lying and they want him to. Right? So when he breaks the law, he represents them. And their desperation and how they feel that the laws of society is not there to help them. So we should all not, we need to learn that laws are not important. As spiritual beings, we cannot rely on laws. We have to rely on truth from inside and then test that out and see how life actually works. The fact that something is legal or illegal means nothing spiritually, because that belongs to the culture you're in. And you will find in one country they may have one law, a very specific law. In the next country they may have the opposite law. Right? It's not important. We have to take responsibility for our own journey and to create that. And ultimately, our response will be from life. Sometimes that will come through, you know, the police. But we still have the responsibility to be who we are, walk our path, and to experiment. There is nothing wrong with following the law. There is nothing wrong with breaking it, as long as you're true to yourself. And you will always meet consequences no matter what you do. Sometimes you think you may do the best thing ever and it has terrible consequences because you were far off. And sometimes you may be doing something you think, oh, that's a bit sketchy, and it turns out to be wonderful. Because rules do not apply, they're all made up. We have laws of physics, we have natural laws, we have spiritual laws, that's it. And we need to experiment with it. And he also, in a way, mirrors that. He doesn't care. He only cares about his own reality and how he is able to project that. And people love it.
In fact, people probably see him as something like a modern Robin Hood, as one of our YouTube viewers says. Robin Hood in the hood of money and power.
Yes, the interesting is he's stealing from the poor and giving to the rich. But yes, and this is part of his big illusion, right? That he only does what's good for him. So everything he does is basically sucking money out of poor people. Again, he's been a swindler his entire life. And again, people support that because they wish they were like him. So it's just in such an interesting journey. And it's important when it comes to all of these icons that we see them as symbols. And I often talk about the Greek gods and also the Indian gods, and seeing this model of how individuals can become that. And he's definitely become a Greek god because he's such an archetype for what he represents. And because we are at a different place in our civilization, we needed him. He's a new Greek god, in disguise for people to be mirrored in. And we need to learn why he's so important, right? And why he represents healing. It's not that he will heal anyone, but it's surfacing all of that tension, all of that stress, all of that kind of discrepancy in our civilization so we can start dealing with it because it's not going away.
We have a question in our lovely studio audience.
I think you started answering some of my questions, but there is so many that he has had as his loyal supporters that he has thrown away and just ditched completely. So, and some of them has also come out, and it's been not even voluntarily, like Fox News, the text messages they sent. There's so many that are supporting him that are absolutely not with him. Will the sit burst at one point and go against him, or will there always just be new supporters of him?
Yes, there will be, because people want to be like him. If you look at all these people, they admire him. As long as they can be close to him, they just want, to be him. They want his energy because they want to be him, right? And because Trump only cares about Trump, at some point, if people are not absolutely loyal, he just kicks them out. And then they turn. And then they behave like Trump, right? So again, remember that he is an individual of conflict. From what I understand, he has been involved in a new lawsuit every month for decades. Right? He has at all times about 50 lawsuits going. It's very impressive. But he loves conflict. It's all he's got. So either you're, for him or against him. Again, he's binary. So there's nothing in between. So there's absolute loyalty or you're an enemy. Right? And many of these people are exactly the same. So they hate him because they're not able to be him. And the only way they can be him is by having access to his energy, right? And then they just want to suck it up, and then but it doesn't mean that they like him. But it's this incredible dependency that people get because they all want to be him. Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at a potential regression in the Western hemisphere, I guess, socially, culturally, maybe economically as well. Are there any good parallels or examples for what we could expect, say like Argentina or Turkey, Iran, who have gone through something similar recently? And if so, and you can tell us a little bit about that, what can we do? How can we most contribute to soften that regression that is coming?
Think of a regression as a correction, right? Back to pruning the tree. It means that we've spread ourselves, too thin, and we need to cut back. So we decide as civilization where to channel our energy and focus, because we cannot nurture everything. We need more discipline. And think of also that when we, in this part of the world, we've chosen individualism, right? Everybody wants to be like, whatever they are, and we're not building a civilization anymore, but just individuals, right? You get frizz. It's like you get as many branches as you possibly can, and they're all weak because they're not working together. They're working against each other. And also see what's happening especially in the younger generations, right? There's screaming and criticizing and yelling, and they're just trying to be so special, and they want to be respected for that, and this whole victimization, because they're all weak. And it's not about building anything, it's about criticizing as much as possible and justifying that by being a victim, right? This is the result of the extreme individualism that we've been in the Western culture. So the recession is basically moving back until we find the floor, and that is extremely healthy and natural. It means also, yes, economically that will be a correction, but it's necessary. We need it because we are preparing for a major move forward, just like after the Second World War. So it's basically, if you want to jump, what do? If you stand still and you want to jump, you begin kind of squatting. You move downwards to concentrate your strength and your force, and then you jump. Same movement. So a recession is not, in this case, negative. It's concentrating the movement energy. And to find direction, to apply discipline so you're understanding what direction to move in. And for people to feel, yes, we're on the same team, we're going in that direction, this is what we want. And a lot of old ideas will die, just like, branches that are dead, we cut them off. It's necessary and healthy because we are going to make a major jump. It will take a while, but now it's that concentration of focus, discipline, and energy to maximize the energy of movement once we are ready as a civilization.
All right, we're going to take one last question from the audience.
Just a quick follow-up in that. I'm very curious about how does diversity sort of look in that whole picture when we're squatting down to jump?
Yeah. Diversity is important, but it's very immature at this point because it's become a game of who's the biggest victim. It's not built on strength, but I want to be recognized for me, It's that's weakness because it's not contributing to anything. It's just criticizing, right? Because, and also if you disagree with someone, then you're like a something phobe, and it's not healthy. So we are moving into a very kind of diverse civilization, but not based on being victims. And what's interesting, because also in the Western world, we have focused too much energy on giving kids education that is just bullshit. That does not really contribute anything, but basically educate kids in new ways to criticize society and be better. That's not building. That's not contributing. So we need to stop this obsession with victimization and criticism and discipline ourselves, because when it comes to survival, diversity is not important. It's not about who you are, but are you doing anything useful? Right? Because now it's all about identity. You can't build a civilization on identity. You build them with skills. So we need to move into more of a meritocracy, as it's called, where basically you're measured on your merits. What you bring, what you build, how you contribute. And nobody gives a fuck about what you look like, who you are, your identity, this or that, because that's not important. Now we've moved in the direction where, identity, gender, race is so important that that becomes your profession. And it should be the opposite, right? So it's at this ridiculous place right now, and that's part of what we need to remove, because we need to see the strength in diversity, right? It's about spreading out kind of genetics as much as possible, right? That's part of evolution. It's seeing, what am I bringing to the table? It's not saying I want to be seen for me. That's not bringing anything. It's demanding an audience. So diversity is in its infancy because the way we deal with it is based on where our civilization is now, the extreme individualism. And then it becomes about me. It's not about what I can give, right? And this is where we need to go. But then we need to discipline first. So it's like, I don't care about your identity. I don't care about anything. What can you do? What's your skill? What have you done? How can you contribute, and can you prove it? And then I will relate to you based on that. It's the only thing I will judge you based upon is your merits, right? So we will move more in that direction over time. It will discipline everyone, and then we will learn that, strength, contributing to society. That's what we should be doing, not seeking benefits or respect from other people because we're so special. That's sucking energy out, right? So when we kind of move forward as a civilization, when we then have gathered enough kind of movement energy to then jump, then we will understand as a civilization, we will look at diversity in a very different way. We'd see it as individual strength because we're all specialized, right? We all have something unique to bring to the world. But then we need to focus on bringing it to the world and not seeking an audience, right? So this is part of the immaturity that we will grow out of at some point. And everything that has to do with diversity today, I think when we look at it from a rational and spiritual perspective, we see that it is in a very immature state. It's natural because we are in the beginning of that. But it needs to be transformed, and it has to move through its own evolution before we're able to look at diversity as strength, right? And something we should bring. Because when someone says something about themselves, it's like, okay, good. How does that lift the world? What are you bringing? How is that influencing the world and people's lives in a positive way beyond yourself? Because as long as it only affects you, nobody should care. Because then you're sucking energy. You should be a generator for energy. You should be channeling in. So as long as we want to be the center of attention, we're part of the problem. Again, back to the first part after the Second World War, people came together. The focus was on building a civilization, not exploiting it. And we need to get back to that, and we will. So everything we see on the planet now is part of that slow, disciplining process of pruning, and as it's beginning of that kind of squatting movement to maximize the strength, agility before the jump. And yes, humans will become more realistic. A lot of things we think are important today will not be important. And we will reinvent, and we will transform, and we will be better after the jump. So it's important, again, when we look at a person like Trump, that we see this large context of what's going on. And he's an absolute gift for many reasons. But bringing all of these conflicts to the surface, giving all of these people a voice, and mirroring, all of that kind of ignorance in the world. Ignorance does not mean that you're stupid. It simply means that you don't know, right? As a society, as a civilization, we've not been good enough at educating everyone, letting everyone be part of our civilization. And it has moved forward too far for some people and too little for others. And this has to be corrected. So, again, do not fear. Do not criticize. Do not judge. Do not hate. Do not look at him and feel better than. Do not look at his followers and criticize them. See where they're at. See their point of evolution. See, how they, in maybe a less mature consciousness, are trying to deal with an increasingly complex world. It's very, very challenging. And they don't know, they don't understand. And he makes them feel that they're powerful. He makes them feel that they can understand now because he lives in the same type of reality that they do. Behind all of it is love. It's always about the evolution. It's always about the unfoldment of everyone. So, being the way he is, he triggers a growth. He triggers unfoldment and visibility for many people who felt that they were not part of it. Now they feel they can express themselves. And yes, a lot of what they express, obviously, is a result of ignorance. But they're allowed to be ignorant. They're allowed to be exactly where they are. And it's the kind of responsibility of civilization in general to uplift, to include, to educate, to heal. And if you feel that you are on a different level, you are the one with the responsibility to do so, right? If you are ahead, you are responsible for those behind you. Always. That's what comes with spiritual growth. Whenever you are in higher consciousness, you are automatically responsible for those walking in your footsteps. So that's part of it. If you feel that you know better, prove it. Be the solution. Practice it. Right? And if you don't know how to be better, then shut the fuck up. Right? We have to be in a state of love at all times. I don't care about your spiritual practices. I care about the result. I care about what you demonstrate every day in your life, how you live your life. If you are part of the solution, if you're part of the upliftment of the world for real. So his narcissism, mirror yourself in it. I'm sure we all have parts that are a little bit narcissistic, right? And see him as a positive force in the world, letting all of this come to the surface so we all can heal, and that includes you.
As we were preparing for today, we were remembering the British in World War I told everyone, keep calm and carry on. Seems like good advice tonight as Trump takes us ahead into a period of correction and a bit of chaos and craziness that he leaves in his wake. So from all of us here at IKYA Center, thank you so much, IKYA, for tonight, and thank you all of you for joining us for IKYA Live, World News from the Spiritual Perspective. We will be back next Monday at 19 o'clock Oslo time, and we look forward to you joining us as we bring the world's news topics to the spiritual level to see what they're really all about. Until then, thank you from IKYA Center.